Okay, let's watch this. This is the stream, the live stream that um Ghost Crawler and some ex Blizzard Riot Games employees joined together to make a new MMO, and they did like Q&A, something like that, like a live stream. Let's see what they talk about here. 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh my god!
Hello, fellow kids.
Ooh, that's
Welcome to the first FPC live stream. I'm Greg Street. I started this studio, and I'm also the game director for our MMO that we call Ghost. You are
Ghost.
probably wondering what is going on.
Okay, the
We have a
sound is a
remote
little bit low.
studio, and we don't have an office space, and one of our values is to not take ourselves too seriously. So we found the most ridiculous space we could for our stream today. And I brought some of the team here to help answer your questions. So why don't you guys introduce yourself?
Oh, there we go.
Hey, my name's Cameron. I'm the Chief Technology Officer. That means I support the engineering team who are building the tech for the game. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Hi, my name is David Kublak. I'm the art director. I support basically design, code, everything with creating content for art and design.
Hey everyone, I'm Ed, UX director for Ghost, and I do everything from controls to UI to the occasional presentation, prettifying. And for my friends out there in my Sapphire Guild, if you are not watching this, you're probably loot locked next week, so enjoy.
I'm Christina, I'm head of product, which means I look at things like user research and how do we build a game that gives players everything they need.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Shanti. I'm the head of the IP. We're making a brand new universe for this game from the ground up to support the gameplay, but also be a place that we hope you can come and enjoy for a couple decades. So very happy to be here.
Okay, damn.
Hello, I'm
Couple
Brian.
decades.
I'm the gameplay design director. So my job is mostly around the classes and the combat and the traversal and basically everything you do when you press a button and punching monsters, those types of things.
Punching monsters.
Yes.
My name is Candace. I'm the content design director, which means I dabble in things like red and blue shards, the cities, raids, quests, dungeons, the open world, all that fun stuff. And I do the monsters and enemies, which you, as aforementioned, punch.
We were limited on the number of golden couches we can fit in this room. So we have a bunch of other people in the studio. Just want to shout out to them as well. You'll be seeing a lot of this crew, and you'll be seeing a lot of the whole team. So let me start just by talking a little bit about Ghost before we get to your questions. I want to stress we're in early development, and that means the art and ideas are not final. And that's the whole point. We want to share all this with you early so that we can get feedback, make changes, and make the game better before we are finally live. We think the right way to tackle a project as big as an MMO is to be careful about where and how we innovate. We think this is a risk when you try to innovate too much. That's what leads to a MMO with a dev cycle of 10 to 15 years, and ain't nobody up here wants that.
Okay.
We're gonna be really careful where we do innovate. A great example are, several of us came from World of Warcraft, and we love WoW's Dungeons and Raids. We don't think there is a lot we need to do there differently. We'll put our own spin on it. It's a different game, it's a different IP, but overall we're not gonna spend a lot of points innovating on things like that. However, we think adventuring, like going out into the world, doing quests, kind of figuring out where you're supposed to go next, has not aged super well, and we think that is a great opportunity to innovate. So I want to talk a little bit about that.
This is a concept art. I like it. It's cool.
So our game is set in a shattered world where players look out into the sky from a mysterious ancient city and see countless shards of broken worlds waiting to be discovered. This is some of our latest concept art for that setting, but I also want to show you how this has already evolved. When the team was first brainstorming about the world, I got excited and made my own sketch of how the shards might float above the city, and everyone teased me about it mercilessly. And so I drew it again in Photoshop where it looked tiny bit better, and we used this for our first several pitch decks. This is what game development looks like. It starts looking pretty bad. You make it better and better. You hire better artists who can actually draw, and eventually you should be able to produce something pretty cool. Our art teams took these concepts and got us to our latest vision, which we'll continue to experiment with further. This is by far not the final way the game will look. So you probably get the idea that one of the major focuses for us is creating 2 different types of world shards for players to explore. We're calling these red shards, are like
World
more
shards.
traditional MMO
Like-
zones with lots of danger, dungeons, and
That gives me the idea of RIOT charts or whatever they're called that exist in the world. Runes, I think this is in the RIOT universe. So they make their own idea and they
world
take
bosses.
the
This
shards.
is where you'd find most of the dungeons and raids in the game, and other players, particularly strangers, are really important here. A player on Twitter compared them to WoW's Timeless Isle, and that's a great way to think about it. And then our blue shards will be more of a private realm for you and your friends. The design draws on some inspiration from survival games, but it's not about starving or freezing to death. It's more about you charting your own path the way you want. And while the red shards offer a consistent theme park experience for every player, the blue shards open up individualized and different sandboxes for you and whoever you choose to let in with you.
I like the concept art.
The basic loop of Ghost when you play is you'll go back and forth between the blue shards and red shards. Perhaps you need an important reagent for your next upgrade that can only be found in the red shards. Or maybe your friends let you know that a rare boss just appeared and that boss drops great loot, but you'll need to assemble a small army to go and dispatch it. These accomplishments are then things you can bring back to further improve your character and the blue shards. Now, we think the opportunity here is that when you're playing on a blue shard, your actions will be permanent, whether you deplete a mine or clear out a dungeon, a dragon's lair. If you want to build a village for you and your friends, there won't be random players walking through to mess up the experience. If you want to set up a guild versus guild PvP shard, you won't have to worry about random arrivals later on causing an imbalance. But without random players, you don't really have an MMO, right? So the red shards are where you get that massive multiplayer experience that we all love. Now, it's easy to talk about world shards in a way that sounds really dry or even disconnected, and honestly, systems designers are really good at doing that, which is why developing the world of Ghost is really important to us as well.
Ghost,
Our
interesting
goal
name.
is for Ghost to be immersive, mysterious, and worthy of your time and investment. We take inspiration from everything from Elden Ring to D&D's Planescape.
Okay.
Because we want the world of Ghost to be a fresh take on the fantasy genre, we're experimenting with a lot of different types of creatures and races you'll encounter, and that work even carries into class design. We want to have a lot of classes, and while you probably won't find something as basic as warrior or mage, some of the classes will be familiar, and then some of them will honestly be a little weird, like this room.
Like
We
what?
hope everyone, some of them will honestly be a little weird, like this room. We hope everyone can create characters and find classes that fit the playstyle they love, but alts are also core to the idea of playing Ghost. So experimenting with different classes should feel rewarding and not like you're falling behind. Our classes are organized into different factions, and these factions are working secretly against each other, sometimes with each other, to determine the future of the city. The factions don't limit who you can play with. This isn't about preventing you from playing with your friends. They're just there to give the classes some depth and motivation to help drive our narrative. You can see here some visual exploration of one of our earlier factions. But I want to stress, not every faction would adopt this art style, and there will be a gamut from dark and serious to cute and silly and probably even dangerously sexy.
Oh, this is. Let me see that.
This
Let me
was
see
in
that.
dangerously.
Okay, is that like a ninja samurai? This is Irelia, literally. This is a gunslinger. What the fuck is that? Okay, I like this. This is cool.
Sexy. So with that, we'd like to get into some of your questions, and I want to introduce one more member of the team. John is our biz guy, and he is going to be our MC for today.
Hey, John.
Yay, John.
Hey everyone, so I've nominated myself responsible for reading the questions out to the team. We'll start with the first one, Brian. This one is a heavy-hitting question, but it was one of the most upvoted. So, Towel the Tank asks, will there be tanks in your game? And if so, how many?
Well, I'm not surprised. I know Tali's a great guy, so I'm not surprised that his tweet was well liked as in addition. Yes, there are certainly going to be tanks in our game, but I think we want to look at and revisit what tanks mean to the group in terms of gameplay, right? What do they do on a second per second basis? Does their
Okay.
boss always have to be hitting them or their tank buddy? Could it just be that there are key moments where the tank needs to be there to defend their team against a huge attack? Or is it possible that there's just a big guy in the group that, like when you see Marvel's Endgame, that the Hulk's got to match up with the big brute of Thanos' crew there. So just trying to find, and explore different options there. And that could mean that we have, some tanks that are in melee as they traditionally are. Maybe we have pet class tanks. Maybe we have range tanks. I don't know. It'd be cool to hear what you all think about those types of things. And when we do experiments and explore that, have you try them and see what you think.
Okay.
So thanks for the great question.
Thanks, Brian. This next one's for you, Shanti, from Ritzadet, who asks, will the game's story, world, and inhabitants treat each player character as if they are the hero?
That's a great question. A lot of RPGs have the benefit of having one player and they can kind of be the center of the story. MMORPGs have thousands and thousands of players, and so it's a little bit more unwieldy to have something like the Chosen One, because you have to ignore all the other thousands of Chosen Ones around you. What we're going with is something much closer to how Destiny does it, for an example, where you're part of an elite crew, an elite group that has powers greater than the average NPC or civilian you see on the street. This gives us room to introduce
Okay.
NPC.
I mean, I'm pretty sure in Destiny it's even higher than that. You're stronger than even the average hero of plays. Your hunter is 3 steps ahead or even 10 steps ahead on top of the rest of the hunters in the story and the lore. It's like you're kind of the chosen one. You're the one that defeated Crota, Oryx, the Forsaken Raid, all of these like super crazy enemies. So you're kind of you are a little bit of that chosen one. You are the rare, the weird one, the little bit special. So it's not like everyone is on the same place as you. In terms of the lore, of course, the players, everyone is there.
Develop their arcs alongside you and kind of have it feel like, you don't have the entire burden of the universe on your shoulders. You have others to bear it with and adventure alongside.
Okay.
Good question.
All right, next question over to Candice from at xmadson. What is the reason for having blue shards and red shards? It seems like blue shards are their own survival game base builder that's separate from the MMO. Why can't this exist in the red shards or vice versa?
I think the superpower of our game is in the blue shards. And when we say that you're going to play blue shards, it could mean that you're just playing one blue shard for the entire season or the entire expansion, just like building and decorating your base and killing monsters and stuff like that. But it can also mean that
I don't
you're
know what that
playing
means.
several
Blue or
blue
red
shards. You
shard.
can play hundreds of blue shards or maybe even just dozens. The idea behind blue shards is that we're always going to give you a lot of variety. So we love exploration. We love the exploration element of survival games. And since these blue shards are kind of generated just for you and your party, we can always throw some cool, like wacky surprises at you. Like, what if it hailed razor blades and you had to keep shelter nearby? Or what if the world was just slowly crumbling around you and you had to like collect as many resources as you can and get the hell out before it falls? So one is like the exploration angle. Two is the shared progression. We love shared progression in survival games. So things like upgrading your crafting bench so that everyone else can use that crafting bench and like submitting your recipes to it and like that sense of community that you really only get in survival games. And now imagine you can take that character, you can take that community and then like inject that into the traditional MMO that has all the raids and dungeons. And you're getting like a mix of your gear from both of these blue shards that you're investing in, that you're playing multiple of, and then the red shards that you're more used to doing things like instant story, dungeons, raids, world bosses, all the cool stuff. Like we really want to concentrate the cool stuff about like the open world experience, so that we can kind of like divide the experience between like, here's your exploration loop and here's your like static loop.
Okay.
Great. Okay, I'll toss the next question over to Ed. This one comes from @MysticalOS, who asks, do you plan on supporting UI mods? And if so, will they be curtailed to not create the arms race present in WoW, or will you take the Final Fantasy approach?
Ooh, that's a good one. Spicy. I know, it's spicy. Thanks for the question, Mr. OS. Big fan. So I think you've astutely called out like that there is a pretty big risk to doing something like add-ons in the context that say like WoW does them, right? Where you can get to the point where you've got all these interesting fights with great mechanics, and then you have people who are sort of just in this arms race with the developer to like build add-ons that play the game for you, right? Shout out to Foji and WoW Classic for doing this for my raid in Wrath of the Lich King. And so I think that's something that we probably don't want as much of. I think the combat modifying add-ons world is probably not one we want to live in. But while we don't know exactly what we're going to do, there's probably some great use cases for exploring add-ons, and I'll try to talk about a couple of them. So, like, examples that come to mind for me are things like, imagine that there is an accessibility feature that we maybe just haven't been able to prioritize yet, but a passionate developer in the community could build it for the game, and that could enable new people to play who wouldn't otherwise be able to play. Like, I think that's awesome. And likewise, there are just players who have strong preferences about how their UI should look, and they may not be in the realm of what the base customization in the game allows. And so allowing someone to serve those needs, I think, is good. So I'm not exactly sure where we're going to go. One thing I can say is I think we know that we have a responsibility to ensure that a player can download, pick up, and play our game without using add-ons, if that was something that we had.
That should be the case.
And not have to worry about, like, we've all probably experienced that thing where we're trying to onboard a friend. It's like, okay, download the game, then like install these 80 add-ons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then like 6 hours later after you've, configured them, you're tired and you don't end up playing. So like, I think we want to avoid that world no matter what. And TBD on like exactly what we do with add-ons and which kind that we support, if we do that at all or whatever. Yeah.
All right, Greg, this next one's addressed to you from
The fist pump.
who says, more and more systems-heavy games seem to be dominated by the soulless quest of optimization at the expense of social decency. Greg mentioned social play is what makes MMO special. What's your strategy to keep optimization from destroying the social fabric of the game?
So peeling back the curtain a little bit here, the historical business model for a lot of MMOs was to keep players playing as much as possible, because that's, where the revenue comes from. And we don't think that has aged super well. Like, when Baldur's Gate 3 came out, I wanted to just play a lot of Baldur's Gate 3. And if I had been raiding or something at the time, that might have been an issue for my guild. If you're a hardcore raider, like my friend Ed here, that may be fine. You may want to raid all the time. And we know that the optimization game is fun for some players. They want to try to, first you beat the boss, then you try to beat your friend's DPS. Like, we get it. And that's fine. But we really are trying to design Ghost to fit in your life. And because we're releasing the story in chapters, if you feel like you've kind of seen the end and you want to take a break for a little while, that's fine. We're not going to get mad at that. And we're going to try to make sure all the systems in the game can support that. So if you want to push blue shards, if you want to keep trying to do harder and harder raids or engage in PvP, all good, and we'll support that. But if you want to make room for other games or, God forbid, work with your family, you could do that as well.
I mean, I guess a mix between WoW and Final Fantasy. WoW gives you that you can play it 15 hours if you want. Final Fantasy gives you you can play the patch, complete everything, and quit, and then come back the next patch. So I think a mix between those two. If you want to play the game all day long for the whole patch until the next one, you can do it. If you want to do just the patch content, you can do it and then quit and come back the next patch. I think that's healthy. That is really good.
Great. Okay, next question over to Brian. With respect to combat, the website describes targeting in such a way that it's not clear if it means tab targeting or fixed combat. Will it be real-time combat like we see in New World, Black Desert Online, and so forth, or will it be a hybrid like Guild Wars 2?
I think the short answer is more of a hybrid. The long answer is is that, first and foremost, our game is to be playable on the PC with a mouse and keyboard, right? We feel like there are millions of MMO players out there. They're very comfortable in that environment, and being able to click on individual targets, being able to hit tab to select them, that's something they're used to. And it's a very approachable model, right? There's a lot of people that you've been probably able to introduce to MMOs in the past, and they're very quickly able to get into the game, right? And we want that. We want, one of the most important things about playing this game is playing with your friends. And so part of that is making sure that it's approachable for everyone. What we also want to do, though, is we want to make sure that it can be played with a controller. And so that has certain challenges, right? And certain things we might have to do differently. And so we're exploring other ways that you would do targeting, more of like what we often call like a soft lock targeting system, where you're maybe on a controller and the right stick moves the camera, and it's basically doing tab targeting for you. It's selecting a target based on where your crosshair is looking. And then trying to add a lot of mechanics from popular action combat games that you might see, like Shadows of Mordor or even Spider-Man or Assassin's Creed.
What?
There's a lot of things they do with combos and assassinations and counters that we think we can bring into MMO combat and make it a bit more interactive and physical and interesting. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of targeting and combat at this time.
Yeah, I think, you brought up controller, right? And I think, we've been exploring just on the team already, how can more fine-grained targeting work with a controller, right? Yeah. That's something that we would need to have even if we otherwise had tab targeting. So there's stuff like that I think we're already digging into, which is exciting. And I don't know, maybe we'll share it with players online or something at some point and get feedback and talk about it, because I think that'd be really fun to do.
And to delve into it just a little bit more, one of the greatest challenges we've talked about is healing, right? So how are you going to heal on a controller? And so, you've been doing some really cool...
I mean, people do it with Final Fantasy. They heal with a controller, so what's the problem with that? I don't see any.
Prototyping on that. I think it's pretty cool. I think players will be excited about what we have, and we'll be happy to share that when we feel it's a little more refined and shippable on the App Store.
Or they'll hate it.
Yeah, or they'll hate it. One of the two.
We'll change.
Also okay. And we'll change it, yeah.
All right, let's keep moving here. So over to you, Koob. A question from AnonOpinion87. What is the art direction of the game? More stylized like WoW or more realistic?
Yeah,
Will it be built in a way that it won't become outdated graphically with options for visual upgrades in the future? Will it be third person or isometric or something else?
That is a lot of questions.
Damn. That's a huge ass
I'm going to
question.
start with the art style one. This is it, right?
No.
No, I think, I think when we were going through the slideshow earlier, there was a wide range of things that we were showing, and that goes also back to some of the things that we were saying in the beginning. We are early in development. In that early development, we're exploring the boundaries of where we want to go with the look of the game. With the tone of what we're trying to do with the narrative and the IP, we know we're not going to be too stylized or cartoony, but we also know, to your point of things that end up being dated, this is a game that we want players to love and play, not just for years to come, but for decades to come. So it also won't be a game that is ultra realistic. So in this kind of process, we'll kind of be working to refine where that actual direction is. And I think the third part of your question about the camera, I think we can lock it in that it is going to be a third-person camera, not isometric.
Good. Nice.
Unless you hate it, then we'll change.
Our motto.
You all got to hate it, though.
As long as one person likes it, we're going with it.
Chat seems happy so far with that response. So we'll,
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we can keep our job.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, Chad.
So this next question, actually, I'll cheat and ask two in one. The first is, knowing oceanic servers would be a pipe dream, in what ways will you design the game to reduce the impact of higher ping on being able to effectively play? And then a related second question, will this game have cross-server grouping for players? Can NA play with EU homies? Cam, that feels, as our resident Australian expert and CTO, that feels like a good set of questions for you.
Yeah, for start, I love this question because I'm an Australian, and growing up in Australia and wanting to play MMOs when they first came out, it was really hard. And so I actually didn't get to play MMOs for a really long time. And so I can really empathize, and it's really important to me that we actually solve this. I think the combat that Brian described actually can make the game quite latency friendly, and so we can have players playing with each other from all over the world. I don't think it's the right answer to just say we'll have oceanic servers. I think the right answer is to make it that you can be part of the worldwide community. And so that also goes to the second
Great.
part of this question, which was about
That is
how
nice.
easy is it going to be to group with friends? It needs to be easy. Like one of the core tenets of our game is that you can play with your friends. And so if you then had to do like some kind of weird transfer or play on a different server or not have your characters, that would be a pretty terrible experience. And so we're pretty committed to that. The exact server model, we don't know yet, but it'll be very friendly to playing with your friends, playing with people in other countries, and for like, you know, latency tolerant connections.
I hope chat likes that answer too.
Yeah. The Australians in the chat.
All right, let's switch it up a bit and start taking some of the questions live from chat too. So 100 Fists asks, how do you avoid falling into the procedural generation traps that so many other games fall into?
Yeah, Greg, how?
100 fists.
Want me to take this one? Procedure generation like AI or just like soulless random games? Probably can't answer fast enough to make this work, but
I don't know. Yeah.
I'll answer it both ways. We're relying a lot on variability and random generation for our blue shards, but we take a lot more inspiration from, I mean, several of us worked on Age of Empires, which has random maps, or Civilization. Those are not procedurally generated in the sense that it's just a bunch of empty fields and maybe the field is green or maybe it's brown or maybe there's a bush. Like, we want to make sure these maps are fun to explore and that you see cool things on them and that adventuring is fun. Sometimes procedural generation creates like a soulless experience where you have a great quantity of places to explore, but none of them are that interesting. That's the exact opposite of what we're going for. We want the experience of starting a new blue shard to be really exciting because you don't know what you're going to find, and it could be very different from anything you've seen before.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and also to add to that, I mean, you'll find things like side missions, you'll find things like recurring characters. We have a lot of tricks up our sleeve to make it feel like it's still one contiguous world. The other thing that we're exploring that could make it feel really cool is like giving the player a modicum of control over their blue shard. So it's not just randomly procedurally generated, this is what you get. What if you could do things like adjust the difficulty? What if you could do things like adjust the season or even bigger things like that? Like, what if you could turn on rules that let you turn on PvP permanently and kill other players and loot their bodies? Like, we want to give you so much control over this thing that it feels like you're breaking the game. Now, does that mean that you can just crank the difficulty to easy and like get all of your gear? Probably not. We're going to control the things that you need to get, the scarcity of resources, stuff like that. That's on the red shards. But when it comes to blue shards, we really want to let you play your way, and we want to get pretty freaking radical about it. And so I don't have anything to show right now, but hopefully we get to do some more deep dives on what blue shards actually are, because I feel like we've really only scratched the surface on what we want to do with these blue shards. And so, like, yes, long story short, we hope that they don't feel soulless because you have your own spin that you can put on them, but also because the stuff that you do in your blue shards is not going to be soulless. You're going to be creating a community with your friends. You're going to be, narratively, you're going to be uniting this shard with like the rest of the world. You're like saving fragments of a dying world. And there's a lot that I could talk about that we probably can't get into in the AMA. I'm very sorry, but we're very passionate about it. We have a lot of ideas, and we hope that you'll like them. And also, we're hoping that we'll get your feedback along the way. Keep us accountable. You know, if it feels soulless, tell us.
We'll change it.
Okay.
We won't.
All right, so we heard it here first. It will not feel soulless. That's great to hear. So let's, we're just gonna start rotating back and forth from live and the ones that came in from social. So a question that was submitted earlier from Woover was, really excited to see some of the crew back together again. I'm having concerns about the game being backed by NetEase. I understand the game needs to make money, obviously, but NetEase makes me think of the MTX and Diablo Immortal. Will this be similar?
No, I mean, in short, we have not finalized our business model yet, but honestly, it's probably going to be something like you pay for a box or you pay for a subscription. Like, we almost certainly, this is not going to be like a free-to-play game with microtransactions. We might have microtransactions, but it certainly won't be pay-to-power. We decided to work with NetEase because they made this crazy offer of they want to fund us and let us kind of make whatever game we want with whatever team we want, and then they'll be there to support us along the way. So it is the most freedom I've ever had as a game developer. I've been doing this for 25 years. It's awesome, and I think that is what has allowed us to attract so many great people to work on the game. But again, love to hear feedback. Even once we start talking about the business model, that's the kind of stuff that we'd like to have. We want players to feel good about spending money.
Great. Next question then from Ciro in chat. You've mentioned a lot of classes. While it's obviously too early for an exact number, is there a ballpark for how many you plan to launch with? Maybe over to Brian for that.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked from anywhere from 20 to 50. I think one of the things to focus on with the number of classes is that playing the game, we expect you to play a bunch of different classes. And so there may not be as much depth in terms of customization and taking a single class into 3 to 4 different directions. But it's more going to be that, this class, it's very easy for my rat catcher to not look like Greg's rat catcher.
There it is.
And for us to have some choices in how we catch our rats, but not necessarily that the rat catcher can do 4 different roles and there's talent choices for all of them. So I think in that respect, we're going to see, but then, we could really go deep on the rat catcher fantasy because we only have to say this is what rat catchers do, right? And so I think that's part of what we're talking about here. So yeah, something in the 20 to 50 space is what we've been throwing around.
Rat
Sold on
catcher.
rat catcher,
Yeah, rat catchers, by the way, is it's like a joke on our team, but
Is
don't
it
be
a joke?
surprised. Don't be surprised if you see it.
Yes.
It is too
We
late
say
now.
we won a lot of classes.
No, it's out there. It's out
Brian,
there.
there are-
The one thing is with having lots of classes. Sure, it's not going to be like rat catchers our only class, but part of it is yes, we're going to have as Greg alluded to in the opening, we're going to have those traditional things that you want to be. There's some guy who wants to be bare-chested with a big sword running around smacking things, and wants somebody to be.
Bajira?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Bajira will. Maybe if he's out there now, and sure there'll be somebody in a long robe who wants to cast spells, and we'll have roles or classes for those type of people who want that fantasy. But we also want to do weird stuff. Yeah. So yeah.
And I actually might be worth mentioning the bit of the controversial point that we don't want all classes to be able to do everything in the game.
Right.
The game will end up feeling homogenized if we have 50 classes that all do the same stuff. And so we're looking into putting time and energy and effort into classifying people as certain kind of DPS roles. Are you a 2-target sustained? Are you a multi-daughter? And really making those classes feel really special. And if we have that in mind from the beginning, we can do things like make sure that our raids and our dungeons and our world has a good enough spread of those kind of DPS profiled necessities that it's not just that, oh, these mages are the best because they can also do instant burst and they can AoE. There's going to be a good mix of encounters that are going to call for those different DPS profiles. So you can always feel good. And honestly, even if you don't feel good, it should be really freaking easy to play an alt. And so maybe it's not unheard of that you can just swap to your alt in the middle of a raid. I mean, we really want to reinvent
Let's try it.
what alts feel like.
I think many of us have suffered in games where we want to play alts, but there just isn't the systems and the support to make it feel like it's a good use of your time. And so from day one, we talked about how can we make alts feel good in our game and make it feel like an organic, natural thing you can opt into to try a lot of different classes.
Yep.
If you want rat catcher, get in the comments.
Yes, yeah. Upvote the rat catcher.
You definitely won't be an elf rat catcher.
Uh-oh.
Is that the
Spoilers.
next question?
That's actually a great question, transition, Candace. And the good news, you all can't see this, but we have people theory crafting their rat catchers now. Someone named theirs Charlie.
I love it.
Yep.
So
Hey, we have a name.
it's going to happen now.
Yeah, I'm sure the Discord is up already.
So, Shanti, I think Candace's comment is a good question. We have not launched our game. We've not shown gameplay yet, but at Nary 5th is perhaps the first player that we've already lost. They write, "No elves, you can't do this to me." Do you have a response?
So we want to develop this game with players from day one. It's why we're all sitting here, cracking jokes and trying our best not to spoil anything. Over the coming years, we will say things that aren't clear. We'll try features that end up not working out. And that's just kind of the part of the journey that we want to take you upon. So in the spirit of that, let me clarify the elves comment, because this is one of the first things we heard was players were like, but I love elves. We do too, actually. I can't remember the last game I played a human in, if there's any other option to play other races. What we don't want to do is transpose Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, elves and dwarves, and plop them into our universe. Because we're making something from the ground up
Why not?
that is ownable and made to be in the shape the game needs it to be. So we're going to have some great races. They're going to call back to a lot of the fantasies and the reasons people like elves, like dwarves, but they're going to have our spin on it and be ownable for our IP in a way that we think you're really, really going to like.
Yeah, and if I could add something to that, Shanti, I think early development, it isn't always just being general about telling people things that have no context. I mean, we could say early development and not say anything. But to your point, sometimes we are just saying what we're thinking right now and want to get that feedback to kind of understand, what is it about elves that you like? What is it about that persona? What is it about that speaks to players, so that we could better understand that and actually, figure out how to work those things into our game.
Okay.
I want to double down on that, because I think it's so important to us that we understand the fantasies that these classes and these races are providing, so that we can learn what you love and then make sure that that's present in the game. And that if you have a fantasy of, I want to be like a class that loves nature and I use nature magic, we have that. If you just want the fantasy of an elegant, beautiful elf, there will be elegant, beautiful races, right? So I think it's really important that you keep telling us how you feel about our ideas.
So it's not like a no, they're not doing that. It's just a not. It's not even their idea, but if people want it, they could do it.
What I heard was, we're not building elves. We're building like 15 different kinds of elves. Perfect.
They're all rat catchers.
And they're all rat. And they have great abs.
All right, back over to you, Cam. Probably a quick question here, but a bunch of people have had it, including Vivid Gaming GG. Is our game built in Unreal or Unity or something else?
Oh, great question.
So I think you can get pretty good results from building a custom engine. But if I said to Greg, hey, just give me 5 years and I'll get a triangle on the screen, that probably isn't going to fly. And so we're going to start with Unreal. Unreal is a great engine. It is not an MMO engine in a box. And so we have a lot of work to do, and we're happy to take on that work and to make a great MMO. But we wanted to start with a great engine. Unreal is a great place to start. And so that's what we're doing.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you. All right, let's keep moving. Maybe actually, while we've got you, Cam, another question here from Chocobone in chat. Will the game be built around anti-cheat and work against bots? This is always an issue on economy and player experience.
Yeah, that's actually a great follow-up question, because that's one of the things that we will need to put a lot of effort into. That's really important. It's important to me. It's actually something that some of us on the team have worked on before. And so things like, if you call that client integrity, things like avoiding exploits, avoiding botting, avoiding dupes, things like that, that we'll put a lot of effort into that. I'm confident we can get that to a really good spot. And then the other side of that is actually content integrity. You don't want, like, I actually hope our game gets big enough that there will be data miners trying to like sneak into the files and work out what it all means. But like, we don't want that to spoil the game for people. And so we'll make sure that content is also protected if we've got a big story moment, or even if we want to just hide for gameplay reasons, like what is this upcoming boss mechanic, then we want to make sure that we put enough like content integrity tooling in place that can't get spoiled and that can't get data mined. So that stuff's hard, but I'm confident we'll be able to do a good job of it.
Cam, you're doing a great job answering questions. I'll just give you another one. This one's from at Scripe Wow from Social, who asks, do you plan on releasing the game in patches worldwide at the same time?
So short answer, yes.
Okay.
I think we want a worldwide community, and it's just better if everyone gets the same content at the same time. And so that is our aspiration. That's what we want to do. Sometimes there are practical reasons why that's difficult, different platforms, different countries, but wherever possible, we'll make sure the game and the patches are released at the same time worldwide. And same deal, you don't want to get spoiled because someone in some other country found out about the content and then you didn't even get a chance to see it and you've already heard about it. And so wherever possible, it'll be worldwide.
Except Australia,
Great.
maybe we'll give it to them first.
Oh yeah, that's what I meant. Australia first, and then rest of world.
Yeah, right. Makes sense.
All right, Brian making the wisecracks over there, so you get the next question. This question comes from Denied, who asks, when it comes to characters and alts, will you have to level multiple different tunes like WoW and Guild Wars 2, or will it be more like Final Fantasy XIV, where I can have one character that can learn all jobs by changing stone or weapon combo?
Yeah, it's a good question. We touched on this a little bit before.
I actually don't like the Final Fantasy style. I thought I like it. I did, but not really, because I want to have other characters. I always like making my first character a male character. Someone like, oh, that's me in the game. He doesn't need to look like me. Like, he's me in the game. Like, the RP element is there. He's me. So I want to have other characters, male and female characters, that can be something different. Paladin, a rogue, a shaman, a mage, something like that. So I'm actually not a fan of the Final Fantasy style. I hope it's
I think
more like
we believe
WoW and
you
Guild
know,
Wars.
RPGs,
Guild Wars 2.
it's a lot about creating a character, and your class has a lot to do with the
Yes.
identity of that character. And so we do want character and the classes to be tied together. So if you create a character, it's going to be that class, and that defines it, and you can, you customize it, you make it look that way. But we also want to have this ability to progress your alts or play a lot of alts. And so your progression will probably be more about you, the player, than necessarily your individual characters. There's a balance there. It's a tricky
Like
problem
an account
to
wide
say how much do
system.
you make time investment worthwhile, so it feels like you've made this character more powerful, but at the same time is not a hindrance to you making multiple characters. So those are things we're always discussing. We're going to find pain points. We're going to hear from you on what you think makes an alt worthwhile. But yeah, our plan right now is to make characters and classes tied together, but also to make it pretty easy for you to switch classes.
Yeah,
or characters.
we have talked about this a lot. Some of the things that we really like about the Final Fantasy model is like how easy it is to swap back and forth from classes, and how much sense it makes. Like, oh, I have this different weapon now, and now I'm this different class. There are things that we could do that are inspired in that vein, but ultimately the thing that we like the most, and the reason we chose this direction, was like, we like embodying the entire fantasy of the character within a single character, in the sense that, like, if I want to play a Scourge character, and then I want that to feel like it's in the vein of, Scourge stuff, or I want to play my Tauren character or something, and that's going to feel very different. We want to give you like the full breadth of that fantasy, and I think the best way to do that, to deliver on that, is to let you play a lot of different races, to play a lot of different like fantasies to explore.
I cannot imagine myself playing Dancer or something like that with my main character in Final Fantasy. I cannot. Oh, fuck.
I remember Shanti and I had some conversation about this at one point, and we were just joking around, but it was like things like, how do your characters interact with each other? Like, maybe you have a base and like you can go in and your rat catcher's doing the dishes or something.
Yeah.
And
see
you can
the
like,
alt and
yeah,
just
it's
do-
like
yeah.
grab stuff out of their inventory or like do whatever. Like there may be creative things that we can do and explore that just make it feel overall always better to have more characters than worse, or like you're juggling things and did I do my dailies on this and whatever. So yeah.
And it was actually kind of hard to say that, because we're a little bit afraid of promising things that we can't deliver on, right? Like, what if we can't make 15 different races at launch, or what if we can't even make 4 different races at launch? It's what we want to do, but the reality of like the development and trying to get to ship on time, and what sacrifices you make to have those kind of things put in the game. Anyways, I just want to acknowledge it's like very hard for us to say these things when we're not 100% sure, and there might be a world where we only have 1 or 2 or 3 races that ship, but letting you know what's in our head and where our philosophy is at, I think, is what's important about like opening or staying transparent about our development process and developing out in the open. So
And we have more ideas than Ratcatcher. Let me be clear.
in fact,
You came up with more today, or?
yeah, Ratcatcher might just be our anti-cheat system, is what Cam said.
That's right.
So
Great name
it'll be
for-
somewhere in the game, even if you can't play it as a class.
Brian, you took like a mix of W's and L's in chat for the alts versus not alts type thing. The
Oh
community
yeah,
was fairly
well I'm not
split.
surprised.
Probably the WoW players
Yes.
versus the Final Fantasy
I
players.
love alts. I don't like alts. I like playing one character, and that's the thing. We understand there are people who like making one character and playing that character only.
Yeah.
And so one of the things you have to make sure you're not letting happen is, well, to play this one character, I have to play lots of alts, right? I have to play lots of alts and drive it towards that one character. It's okay to say I play this one character and it can feed my other characters. Like that's a little bit more palatable than saying in order to make my rat catcher more powerful, I've got to play my Gunsmoke Ronin and my, my Swan Catcher or Swan Watcher. I don't know.
That's a new one.
There's a swan right there. I'm looking at a swan. There's the camera here and a swan right there. I want you all to know what is my experience right now.
So where's the rat?
Yes.
I just want to say one more thing on that topic, which is like we are staying curious. So if there is something about having one character that is very appealing to you, very curious about what that is. We have some inclinations, like how easy it is to like share gear, and like is it more of like, is it a fantasy thing that you want, or is it more of a logistics thing? Because logistics are very easy to solve, especially whenever you're building something from scratch. So anyway, that was a baller question. Thank you, John.
Great question.
Also, one last clarification. It's actually an Australian swan. So going back to the Australian thing, we're very pro-Australian.
All right, Brian, while we're with you, chat is spamming this one, so we're just going to do it.
Okay.
Specifically for Holinka, can we get an idea about what PvP will be like? Will there be incentives pushing players to be a part of open world PvP? Will there be a ranking system, BG arenas?
I think a lot to be decided there about the structure of PvP. There will be PvP. I think more of a focus on open world PvP, maybe blue shard PvP, so that every time you're going in, it's a little bit different. Maybe there's blue shard battlegrounds. Maybe there's blue shard arenas. I think that's a kind of an open question. I think one of the big challenges in MMOs, every MMO has this. Honestly, any game that has a PvE progression system and PvP in it has this challenge of, are those two parallel progression systems or not? And I think that's something we're really going to have to think about and, in my opinion, avoid, right? Like, that was always a constant battle in other games that I've seen of, well, is the PvP always better in the PvP situation? Is the PvE always better in the PvE situation? So I don't know. I think we want to explore different ideas there and probably not do it the way everyone else has done it in the past. We have a fresh start, and we can make those types of decisions. So I don't think we'll see very structured PvP things like ranked PvP right out the launch. I think our focus will be more about creating a big world and a world that you can go fight in. And sure, there will be some systemic things that encourage you to go out and have some very dynamic fights, but more of a focus on the open world stuff before
Or on the
we get
PvE.
into a lot of the structured things.
Okay.
And Brian talked about blue shard PvP. I just want to kind of like illustrate what that could mean. So the cool thing about blue shards is that they're like randomized, right? They're like different just for you. They're not the same experience every time. It's not like an arena where you know exactly where all the pillars are. You know exactly where you want to do all your opening. It could be really fun to play a map like Warsong Gulch, but you don't know where the capture points are, and you have to figure that out each time. And maybe sometimes there's some texture between, oh, this one was really easy and this one kind of sucked. But it could also be fun to have those like private PvP experiences where you could turn on specific rules that make things more interesting for you. Like, what if we wanted to play, if we had blue shard PvP, for example, we say, okay, we want this to be kind of like a capture the flag style map, and we turn on that like hailstorm rule that we were talking about earlier, where like now I have to worry about getting to the flag, but I also have to worry about like building shelter and knowing where shelter is nearby. Blue shard PvP could be really, really fun, and we hope that we can deliver on that.
Awesome. Next one's over to Ed. Question, I am interested in hearing more about accessibility options. A key one for me is how targeting worked. Due to how I play because of my disability, I struggle with more action-based MMOs compared to easier tab targeting ones. I know we talked a little bit about the targeting already, but maybe touching on our approach to accessibility.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, for me, accessibility is actually something I care a lot about, even though I don't have any disabilities or anything. And I think the thing that originally sold me on how like valuable and important it can be is to think of it from the perspective of two things. One, like accessibility in the sense of who can play your game, right? There are just, I mean, there are a ton of gamers who have various disabilities who basically can't play some of the games that they love because they just don't have the ability to control them properly or like whatever. I think like looking at accessibility through that lens, if we can solve, you know, important disabilities, like we can actually bring more gamers into our community that we otherwise wouldn't be able to get, which is awesome. And I think the other angle that was really compelling to me when I was first learning about accessibility was the idea that like actually non-disabled players also benefit from accessibility options, right? Options around difficulty, for example, or options around inputs, like even down to whether you can use a controller in our game could be considered in some ways an accessibility feature, right? Because some people don't have the dexterity with mouse and keyboard that they do maybe with controller. So I care about this a lot. I also think, and I'm sure the person who asked this question knows, that like accessibility is a big, deep space, and there are so many things you could try to solve, so many options you could try to like provide, right? And so, you know, on one hand, we care a lot about it, and I think we will definitely try to tackle accessibility features. Which ones and how deep we go and when we do them, I think those are all open questions. And I honestly, I would love to hear from players about the things that typically trip them up in games most, because maybe those are the ones we focus on. I think this kind of speaks also to our live service model, right? Like we're hoping to build a game that we're going to evolve for a long time. So even though maybe day one we serve this set of accessibility features, over months and years and, you know, hopefully decades, fingers crossed, right? Like we can add more and more, and we can support all the kinds of players who want to come to our community and play our game, which I think is exciting. So yeah, I care about it a lot. I hope we can do that. I think the targeting thing was a great example of where we can help to make the game more accessible for players, especially existing MMO players.
That's also why we're excited to have someone like Ed on now to start thinking about this at the very foundational stage and really kind of build in with that thinking as we, you know, get into Engine for the first time and, you know, put the first things in our world.
I recorded that, so I'm going to play
boy.
it back. Whenever I get fired,
It's my new ringtone, yeah.
It's good news for you, Ed. We're going to have a VOD of the whole thing. You can go back, clip out the parts that
Yes.
you want, put it in your
Great.
annual review. Next question over to you, Greg. This one comes from Ace of Sween, who says, I remember Greg remarking on the OG Plus podcast that WoW wants to be the only game you play due to the time commitment required. Time commitment is always an issue in MMOs. How will Ghost approach this challenge? We've also gotten a few questions in chat just sort of asking about
That's a great question.
like, what a typical play session looks like. Are we thinking dailies and weeklies or other types of experiences?
Oh, please, no. Fuck that.
I'm hesitating to answer this because I don't want to throw, you know, other games under the bus, but generally dailies and weeklies are kind of low quality content that are easy for developers to add. So when you need to make sure your players have plenty of things to do,
Basic.
you add more dailies and weeklies because it's, you know, you can play the same quest over and over and over again till you're, you know, really, really tired of it. That's not the framework we want to approach. Because we're telling the story in these chapter-based sessions, we're fine if someone finishes a chapter and pieces out until the next chapter comes along. That's great. Again, if you want to stay and play the game, we will have plenty of alternate activities to do. We think that re-rolling and pushing blue shards is hopefully going to be really fun and have a lot of activity, and you will get rewards from it, but it should feel optional. It shouldn't feel like every day I log in and I do my 4 blue shards, then I go do my daily quest, then I like do my long ass enchantment cooldown or whatever. The tricky part of answering a question like that is you don't want to send the message to the Eds of the world that like, oh, so you're saying your game's not going to have much to do. Like, yes, there will be a lot to do, but we really want it to be tailored around, as a player, how much do you want to play? You're not going to be able to like be the best player in your guild with the best gear if you're like, hey, I like Ghost, but I only want to play a couple hours a week. But you could still progress and you can still see the content and finish the story if you play a couple hours a week.
And I wanted to highlight one of the points that actually me and Christina were talking about. Christina actually blew my mind the other day because we were talking about gameplay loops, core loop, why people come back to the game. And one of the things that we were tackling was like the weekly reset model in MMOs and why they exist and staying curious about like all their better alternatives. And so if we wanted this game to fit in your life, one of the things we could do is say, yeah, there's no raid lockout on raids. And like at first I was clutching my pearls because I was like, well, why will my guild log in every week? What will we do? But I think there's better reason. Like if you wanted to quit our game happy and full of gear because you've seen everything and then come back whenever we give you something else to give you, that's way more preferable than like, you're leaving money on the table, you're leaving loot on the table if you don't clear this raid every week, if you don't finish all of your dailies. Like, this is what we mean by fitting into your life. If you want to finish the game and move on, that's okay too. We're hoping that we give you a lot of stuff so that you don't like finish very quickly, or at least like you have optional things to opt into. But yeah, what's a world like where there aren't any cooldowns on raids? Like, loot locks and stuff like that. Would you have to redesign the meta of the world first race? Why, yes. Are we already thinking about this? Why, yes.
Good question, Candace.
And this is also like why we need your feedback. Like, what is it, if we were to do things like remove raid lockouts, why does that scare you? Why does that excite you? Love to hear more.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that we're going to try and figure out is we want the game to fit into your lives. We know how important that is. We know you have busy lives full of other things to do. But also, we respect how meaningful it is when you've played a game for thousands of hours. And you want to be able to say, hey, playing this game for thousands of hours is very meaningfully different. My experience, my progression, you can see all the love and devotion I've put into this game. So that's something I think we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about in the coming years, how to balance those two things, because they're both important to us.
All right. Another question that came in beforehand, and also a few people have asked in chat, is broadly around the studio's approach to AI. At Rekma asked, how much do you intend to use advancements in AI? Can that help make worlds and NPCs feel more alive or more interactive? Maybe over to you, Koob and Cam on that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get started on that. As Greg already pointed out, we have such craftspeople that are already in our studio, and even with NetEase. One of the things that we want to do with our game is mold this with the community through those craftspeople's hands. So it's really important that we're bringing the right team together that is able to craft this amazing world, this amazing content that we want to create. AI has been tools that people have been using for a long time, in different things, from things like Substance Designer, making procedural textures and things like that. And those are tools that we feel more comfortable using, but tools that may potentially plagiarize somebody's work is not something that we would do. And we want to definitely keep that kind of published content in the hands of actual, artists and craftspeople.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit to that as well, which is I think you did a great job covering kind of content creation workflows.
Thanks, Cam.
Yeah, you should keep doing a good job.
You should be an art director.
Yeah, that's right. But I think there's a whole other class of AI that, and specifically around machine learning, which I think is something that we could also look into. Like, here's an example. We're talking about these kind of infinitely variant blue zones. Like, what if, based on machine learning on people's actual experience, it actually feeds back into the system that generates these blue zones? And so
That's a good idea.
Machine learning on players' fun, effectively, to feed back into what is the next blue zone, what is the next blue zone. And so that's another example where I think we can fit it in without it being the kind of, I guess more controversial or predatory AI like you described.
We're not going to be one of those studios that says, look, we're only going to hire 15 people and have AI do the rest of the work. Like, we hear a lot of crazy promises about the future, and honestly, I think nobody knows, but we are going to hire a lot of great engineers and a lot of great artists and hand make a lot of our content.
Greg, while we've got you, a question that's come from a few folks, including Shambits Gaming, is partnering with players is a great value to have, but what is the actual strategy here? How do you intend to partner up, and what can we expect as players?
That's a great question. This is a brand new frontier. Like, many of our former employers never would have gone for something like this. So we don't have a lot of examples to follow. I think some of the indie games do a pretty good job here of saying, like, look, we want feedback early on, tell us what's working, what's not working. For the most part, our strategy is going to be oversharing. And we know that's not every player's cup of tea. Some of you are probably not the ones watching the stream, but some players out there will say, I want to wait until things are set in stone. I want to wait until I can play the game and see final art, and that's great. And we will make sure you know when we're at that stage. But we also think there are people who are excited to kind of come along this journey, see how the sausage is made, watch us pivot as like our ideas don't turn out as awesome as we think, and we have to do something else. We have a lot of experience on the team talking to players. There is a challenge where we're not building a game by consensus, right? We're not gonna like go out and vote like, hey, what should the next class be? We'll ask for feedback. We will marry that feedback with our experience and our intuition and the actual hard numbers that you get from watching players play test. Sometimes players say they're doing one thing and in reality they're doing something else. So it's helpful to have that information. And just like everything else, this is a great topic to give us feedback on. Like, are you sick of hearing about our studio values and you just want to hear more nitty gritty about like how much armor class does this class have? Do you want to hear more about blue shards? Do you want us to talk to you more? Like, this is not our last AMA. We are going to do some really cool things. I'll just say it now. We have a few interviews lined up with streamers you've probably heard of. We are gonna do a podcast that we're partnering with our good friend Scott Johnson, where I don't know what the cadence will be, but every episode we'll talk a little bit about like, what is it like doing a startup? What changes do we have to make? What are the challenges? It's really...
Are they gonna do the Ashes of Creation style that every month they talk about some team? I'm not a fan of that. I prefer one every 6 months or every year or something like that.
Like
to see
making a
real progress.
documentary, like releasing the documentary as the documentary is being made. So yeah, another experiment. Maybe it will be terrible. We hope not. But yeah, definitely listen in and tell us what you think.
Oh, go ahead.
You sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the other things I'd like to add to that is we're working on a project, we're working on a game, but in some of the early things that we're going to be sharing is going to be on the content, is going to be on, where are we going to be able to go with some of the classes? What are some of the potential visuals looking like? How are we getting some feedback from what the audience may like from that? As great as Unreal is as a tool, we're still not necessarily ready to have playtesters just yet. So I think in that amount of time, we will be kind of involving the community in other ways and kind of like giving them glimpses of what is behind the scenes of creating, this class, or how are we differentiating these zones? And I think that those are the types of things that we're going to be wide open, for feedback. And I think as, Greg pointed out, the feedback is definitely for us to consider, to talk about. We love kind of like just as groups, even questioning and having people consider things from one another. But we're still only, a group of people. I think on our website we have like 14 people right now. So we'd love to get, more information from the rest of the audience.
I think another one of our strong values in the approach to partnering with players is that we understand not all players want to engage with us the same way. So we want to have lots of ways to get your feedback, get your input. So that could be, hey, we're talking to you right now, you're chatting with us, it's great. It could be, hey, we sent out some surveys. It could be play tests, it definitely will be, but more on that later.
Yeah. I don't know if Greg remembers, but when I first joined Riot before coming here, I reached out to him and I was like, can we get lunch? And I just want to pick your brain. And I just remember kind of fangirling over Greg because not because he was a celebrity or anything.
Smart.
Yeah, he's just so smart. No, but because seeing Greg and other awesome developers across the industry engaging with players about how games are made, why we make decisions certain ways, it helps not only excite people who are just interested in game development, which I was and became, but also helps people understand how did we get to the decision that we made, and even if it's a bad one, right? And it lets people give feedback in a better context. So I think, yeah, we're betting basically that there are a bunch of other players who are like little Ed, who might be interested in how the sausage is made and want to have a window into game development, and I think that'll be exciting, hopefully.
I do also want to give a shout out to Ashes of Creation for developing that in the open, and I think that is a good place to start. That's they're kind of pioneering the path when it comes to that, and the reason that they're doing it is because they're crowdfunded, and they treat players as their stakeholders, right? Like, we're going to show you this update. They're going to be super out in the open. That's really cool. I think to add to that, we want to treat players not just like our stakeholders, but like our peers. We're all gamers. We're all MMO enthusiasts. I've been working on MMOs for 15 years, playing them for over 20. And so, like, that's what partnering with players means. It means treating your feedback as valuable as one of our own peers, but also treating you with the respect that you deserve as a stakeholder, as the person who's going to purchase our game. So.
Cool. Next question, I'm going to cheat again and combine 2 questions here so we get more questions. Probably over to Greg. A question that was submitted was, being industry veterans, do you worry this may cloud the vision of the product with the we know better mentality that seems to stagnate development, as we've seen throughout the industry in recent years? And related to that, question that just came in chat from Paddles is, Greg mentioned a long time ago about hiring talent with no experience to see a fresher POV on game development. Do you have any news about that?
Yeah, I mean, 100% this is a concern of ours. When you get industry veterans, you have a lot of experience and you know how to set up a game from scratch. It is easy to lose touch with what our players, particularly younger players, talking about these days. How do they interact with content? What kind of games are they even looking for? So, as Christina alluded to before, part of this is just talking to players, talking to younger players, talking to players from different demographics than we represent, talking to players in different countries around the world to kind of find out what's working for them. Do the current games they play, are they delivering? Is there something absent, a niche we can feel? We will do focus groups, we'll talk to a lot of players, and yes, we will hire people with little to no experience. I just think that will be an awesome way to get a fresh perspective, some crazy ideas. We are not at that place yet. We are a remote studio, so we cannot offer a ton of direct mentorship. Our tools are currently the kinds of tools that veteran developers are comfortable using. So give us a little bit of time to catch up with that, and we will. You will find job recs on our website. I just want to caution you that we will probably get a lot of interest in those roles. So we can't hire all of you. I would love to, but we do want to stay as a smaller studio.
Okay.
All right. Next question over to Shanti comes from at InnoShades, who asks, congrats to the team on the unveiling of the studio. On IGN, it was mentioned you want to avoid typical fantasy tropes such as orcs and elves. Do you have any other examples of tropes you want to avoid?
Orcs and
Dwarves, gnomes,
Dwarves, gnomes.
halflings, dragonborn.
Love this question. A lot of games lean on tropes because tropes are there for a reason, right? A hero overcoming some obstacles with their friends and being triumphant has been in stories for as long as humans have told stories. So we're not going to try to reinvent storytelling in game and avoid all tropes. That being said, one thing we are very excited about is the possibility of playing more in kind of the gray space between the good and the bad. We love it when you can understand why a villain may be doing something, even if you don't agree with it, or watching a hero that 2 seasons ago was your favorite, maybe starting to make some choices that you're not so excited about anymore. We want to be respectful of the passion and the love that players have for characters in the world, but we think there's a lot of really interesting area there in the gray that we can deliver awesome stories and incredible characters for you.
Yeah, and if I were to add to that, that's what I love so much about being able to have art partnership with IP and narrative, because it really helps drive what we could do visually, with that. Already when, Art has been sharing with the team on our kind of weekly cadence of, oh, what about this? Or, Shanti will start, throwing in some designs, and then Greg's like, oh, well, he gave me the go-ahead, so here's 20 more. And I love what we were able to kind of come up with and explore. And yeah, like it's just great having that from the very beginning of the projects, because it's only going to make what we're creating, both visually and for people to play, just more kind of a stronger foundation to grow on over years to come.
We've gotten a couple questions about sort of our approach to solo play versus group content. One of them is from Jagadorium, who says, what's your take on solo players? There are people who like existing in a shared world but have trouble finding time to filter a group of competent people to play with. Is the game built with loners in mind? Maybe over to you, Candace.
Sure, yeah. I mean, some of the stuff I touched on earlier about blue shards and being able to pick your difficulty, it's definitely more solo friendly. Will I say that you'll be able to do everything in the game and kill every monster by yourself? Probably not. But blue shards are a great answer to that problem, where you can roll a new blue shard, do as much stuff as you can, kill the bosses that you can kill, but then when it starts getting too rowdy, just dump it down the toilet, start the next one. Don't dump it down. Give it to the city, or blow it up, or do whatever. So I think blue shards give us a lot of access there, but also, like I had mentioned before, the red zones that we're going to do should be concentrated in just the things that only a big, like, contiguous open world can provide in an MMO. So things, Greg had mentioned, it's kind of like Timeless Isle if you ever played World of Warcraft, but the idea there is, like, there's always something to do, there's something you can jump in on, and you're always welcome whenever you do it. So things like world bosses that are rotating left and right. There's things like treasures to find. And so, yeah, I think that touching on both blue shards and red shards. Oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention was that we also want to explore leaderboard content, stuff like whenever you play Diablo and you say, like, well, if I think I'm the best paladin, can I do some greater rifts and find out if I really am the best paladin? And so hopefully there's a lot for you there too if you're a solo player, but definitely the game has solo in mind. Hopefully you're playing a lot of alts though, because that would be really cool. Yeah.
There's something that comes to mind when I hear that question too, which is like,
They like alts, huh?
there are definitely players who want to play solo, which is great, right? Like I think we've all probably been in that space where, like, I just want to, like, log in and, like, do a thing by myself, which is, I think it's awesome. Yeah, it's how you feel now, yeah. But there are also players who would love to find a friend group to play with, and they don't have the right tools to do it, right? Like, they don't want to be match made into a guild of, like, people they don't know, or, like, they just don't want to kind of go down that path. And, you know, some players like me have been, like, super lucky to raid with a bunch of clueless gamers, shout out Derez, you know, for the past 3 years or whatever in WoW Classic, but it's hard to find that group that you're really going to click with. And so, like, one thing we should be thinking about a lot is how do we build tools to help connect people so that they can find that group that they do want to play with them when they want to play with people, and then let them play by themselves when they don't want to, you know?
That's a great segue. Part of that actually is another superpower of the blue shards is that we can create roles within a community
I still don't understand what the blue shard and the red shard means.
that
okay.
don't exist in other MMOs. I think about the time that I played Rust. I cherish all the time I
Maybe
played
they
Rust.
explained it and I
don't
didn't pay
like killing
attention. I don't
players.
know.
It's actually like a PvP elimination game, but I don't like to kill players. What I like to do is, like, organize all the stuff in our bags. Be sure that everyone had, like, their raid ready. Here's your jacket, here's your food, here's your AK-47. And sometimes when you log into the game, you're gonna have some, like, creepy, like, picture of a clown looking at you, or a mural of Rick and Morty in our house. I kind of like that role of just being like, I'm gonna be the one that combines things. I'm gonna be the one that, like, decorates our house and makes it look beautiful. I'll never go out into combat, and that's okay. And so, like, when you think about being embraced by a community, you can be valued for more than just the DPS that you put on the meter or the healing that you do to the tank. And that's really important to us.
And I'll say just one more thing, and then we really will move on to another question. But also, all of those roles Candace is talking about can be asynchronous. Like, you can be the person that organizes the resources in your base. You can be the person that goes out and scouts and explores it all. So then the other people, you know, log on later that day, they find all these cool things that you discovered for them. And so in that way, you're playing solo, but you're really playing with a group. You're just not online at the same time.
Okay.
Awesome. So what I heard is that Ed is going to help everyone in chat find friends if they need it.
Aw.
Personally go
I will
out.
personally matchmake you. Hit me up.
That's
in the
really
comments.
amazing.
They
Right?
aren't all friends with each other already?
This is now an MMO dating sim.
Yeah, that's right.
So we'll now that we know that that's going to happen, let's take another question here from chat. Muktwow asks, will there be a focus on everyone should be able to get everything, or will there be a discrepancy between the hardcore gamer investing all their time and the casual who just wants to have fun?
Just throwing that up there.
Anyone want that? I mean, I could start. We think exclusivity is cool. I think it's awesome when you have
Wait, what was the
sword.
question?
Just throwing that up there.
casual get everything? Or Wow asks, and let's take another question here from chat. Muktwow asks, will there be a focus on everyone should be able to get everything, or will there be a discrepancy between the hardcore gamer investing all their time and the casual who just wants to have fun?
So FOMO, I guess.
Throwing that up there.
Anyone want that? I mean, I could start. We think exclusivity is cool. I think it's awesome when you have a sword that nobody else has, or at least it's very rare, and then you
Okay.
strut around the city, and we call it peacocking when other people get to see that and they're like, oh, you're awesome, or maybe just very lucky. You flamingos. Maybe just very lucky that you got that. I think again, when players don't have enough to do, they start to look at I need to find best in slot for all of my equipment, and then when I do that, I'm kind of done with the character. We hope we unask that question a little bit by having lots of items where you don't necessarily know where they come from. They might drop on a blue shard. We have lots of different character classes, so maybe you can be the what was your new class you just designed? Maybe you can be the best,
Australian swan catcher.
the best swan dancer on the of your friend group, or the best swan dancer NA, or things like that. So there should be a lot of different ways. Even if all you want to do is compare numbers to other players, there should be a lot of different ways to do that. That's not just about gear score, DPS.
Thanks, Greg. I think the last question that we'll take now, and I'll just go meta for a second as the weird voice that people can't see. We are going to keep talking to players as much as we can. So if we didn't get to your question today, we will be back. We will keep talking to you. It's one of our core values. One of the last questions we'll take for today, though, is from Not Calex, who asks, where can we sign up for playtesting and feedback? Many of us have followed your team for years and want this game to be successful and can't wait to
Your
be part
team
of the
for
journey.
years. Isn't this
Maybe
like a
to you,
new team?
Christina?
Yeah,
What?
I love this question. And the answer is we're going to put something on our website so that you can sign up on the website. We'll let you know when we put it up there. But I did want to give a little more context here about playtesting in particular. So earlier I mentioned all the ways that you could engage in giving us feedback, whether it's surveys or focus groups or things like this, right? There will also be playtests, but in the beginning of game development, playtests are small. It's usually not a lot of people get in. We will, as the game grows and as we develop the game, open the playtest to more and more players, and we're very excited about that. But I think what I want to express is that not everyone will get to playtest this year, but stay with us and you'll get to playtest more, engage with us in the other ways, and there will be lots of ways for us to hear your opinions and put them back into the game.
Okay.
All right, we want to thank you all for watching. We want to thank you for the all of the interest in the stream, the questions you gave us ahead of time, the questions you gave us in Twitch. We really appreciate it. You all are why we're doing this, and this is the start of a very long journey, but we will do as much as we can to keep you informed. And at some point, the person that owns this space is going to come barging in and ask what we're doing in their house. So I think at this point, we'll call it a wrap. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that was a great stream. That was a very nice first stream. That was pretty good. The answer are really good. A really decent amount of questions, but I mean, for a game that I'm pretty sure is super in the early stage, it's like Her said, things could change. They want to add 50 characters that you can create, and they could only maybe they cannot do it, and they make 3, 4, only one, something like that. But for the rest, I think it was pretty good.